What secret are you taking to the grave? I married a woman in college. We spent 7 years together before she divorced me. We have this beautiful daughter together. Since she was 3, she's been asking us for a brother or sister. She's 12 now, and she still laments the fact that she's an only child. I don't have the heart to tell her that her mom aborted the sibling she wanted. As much as I hate my ex-wife, I know my daughter wouldn't be happy to know this was done. By the way, it wasn't my child she aborted. However, when she found out she was pregnant with our daughter, she made 4 attempts to get an abortion. I talked her out of it each time. It's the one negotiation I'm proud I won. I worked for a shipping company at a customer desk. A guy I knew came in to ship a package. He was a known drug dealer in my town. He didn't recognize me. The package was wrapped in duct tape. I took the package, brought it out back, and made it disappear into my backpack. After my shift, I opened the package and found $37,890 in cash. I never returned to the job and never heard anything about it. I left Texas a month later with cash in hand. Can't make this shit up, real story. A few years ago, a friend of mine asked me if I wanted to party at this chick's parents' house upstate. He said there'd be a lot of people and girls. I was down for it, even invited some of my other friends. So we're at this party, and my friend comes up to me and tells me he thinks there's a large amount of marijuana in a locked room upstairs. He said this girl's parents are big-time dealers. I honestly thought it was a load of shit and continued to drink and smoke. I passed out around 2 a.m., only to get woken up 3 hours later by my friend and another kid shaking me, telling me to start the car. I was so shot I didn't know what the fuck was going on, so I started the car and just sat inside it. My friends grabbed their sleeping bags and stuff, threw it in the trunk, and we left. It took us 2 hours to get home. Once we got there, they asked me to help them carry in the stuff from the trunk. When I picked up their bags, I noticed they were heavier and I heard glass. I opened them up in the trunk and found 4 large sealed mason jars of marijuana and 3 1-pound sealed bricks. I freaked the fuck out. I just drove with all this in my car. I was scared this woman's parents would find out and kill us. Anyway, we never got caught. Sold a lot of weed for a while, made a lot of money, and got stupid high for a few months. I never told anyone because I don't know who she was, who she knows, or what happened after they realized at least 4 to 5 pounds were missing. Who the hell throws a party at their parents' upstate herb house anyway? The girl never contacted my friend who invited me to the party, so we all assumed they didn't expect him or any of us. My dad was a biker. He died in a motorcycle accident. He had this huge old garage/barn that he spent hours in. I was cleaning it out with my sister, and we found a locked briefcase buried in a cupboard. We popped the lock, and it was full of women's clothing, stockings, lingerie, things like that, and definitely not my mom's size. I was pissed, thinking he had been cheating on her. Then I got into his AOL accounts. My mom can't work a computer any better than she could work a spaceship, so I had to go in to shut his accounts down. There, I found all of these screen names that he had made over the years. Every one of them had to do with stockings and panties. That's when I realized that the clothing in the briefcase wasn't a woman's, it was his. My sister and I swore never to tell and we got rid of all the evidence. My mom is extremely conservative, and even though I don't agree with her point of view, I know it would kill her to find out. That briefcase is sitting in the dump now. My parents took me to get my hearing checked when I was 12 because I wasn't responding when they called my name. I pretended not to hear some of the beeps in the hearing test room. As a result, I wore a hearing aid for 2 years when I was 12 to 14 years old. I don't know why I did that. When my brother took his own life, I was walking into his house to hang out. I never knocked because we're best friends, so his house is my house, and my house is his house. Anyway, I walked in, got some food from the kitchen, and figured he might have a girl over because usually, he'll hear me and say what's up from across the house, so I didn't bother him. I had been in his house eating for about 10 minutes when I heard the gunshot that killed him. When anyone asks, I tell them I found him like that. I don't think I'll ever be able to tell anyone I know that if I had just knocked or walked down the hall, I might have saved his life. To give some insight into any reasoning for what my brother did, whether it be financial issues, relationship troubles, or what have you, I'll share the last line of the short note he wrote before he died. It reads, "So I am truly sorry if you think I'm being selfish when I have been selfless my entire life and it has left me with nothing. Rest in peace, brother." In 5th grade, I was bullied by a group of kids. I was your typical nerd. Picture a nerd and don't alter the first image that pops into your head. Anyway, I was a teacher's pet, spent lunch hour in class sorting papers, etc. One day on our playground, this group of 3 bullies threw a basketball at my face and broke the lenses off my glasses. As they were running away, I grabbed a rock and blindly threw it at the blur in the distance. I hit one of the kids in the back of his ear, and he passed out at the sight of his blood running all over the place. Once I realized what happened, in a panic, I ran to my classroom before the other 2 kids could and pretended I had been there the whole time. The 2 kids snitched on me, understandably. After the ambulance, police, principal, and parents showed up, I denied everything, and everyone believed me. I even cried and played the "why are they blaming me" card when, in fact, my tears were genuine I might get in trouble tears. I was in 5th grade, and I regret running away and leaving that kid to potentially bleed out, but they never picked on me again. I'm also happy to report that all 3 of them grew up to be pieces of shit, a deadbeat dad, a pothead living with mom, and a Walmart cashier. My sister worked as a prostitute. I wish she'd never told me, but I think she needed to tell someone. One day, she was beaten up by a pimp of sorts who found her after she had run away. My strict Christian parents sat me down and told me they needed to know why someone attacked their daughter. They're pushy, and I cave on this kind of stuff all the time as I can't lie. But this time, I said, I do know why, but trust me when I say there are things you don't want or need to know. This is one of them. It is better for you if you never know and never ask about it again. I half expected my mom to scream at me and for them to keep pushing. She just nodded, said okay, and they walked off and never asked again. I don't understand this behavior, but I suspect they guessed what was up from my comments and were willing to go the rest of their lives without having their guess confirmed. I don't know. My sister's doing really well now. She has a husband, house, children, dog, idyllic new country, you know the deal. I miss her, but it's better this way. I once took a week-long trip to London. My mother asked me to get her a small rock from there, because neither of us had ever been out of the country. So, I spent the whole trip looking for this rock, and finally found the perfect one. Fantastic, she'll love it when I get back. So I get home, I'm taking inventory of all my souvenirs, and the rock is gone. I immediately think back to where I last saw it. It was on the bedside table in the hotel in London. Shit. So I quickly run outside and find a decent rock. I clean it off. We live in Georgia, freaking red clay is noticeable as hell, and wrap it nicely. I eventually gave it to her with the story, I got it from a castle. It would break her heart to know that I got it from our backyard. When I was younger, I had a little sister who made some candles at school. She was about 6 or 7 at the time and she would always ask our mom if she could light the candles. Mom always said no, mainly because she didn't want the homemade candles stinking up the house. Well, one night the power went out in the house and we couldn't find any of the flashlights. My sister got the idea to use her candles. So we lit the candles and we enjoyed each other's company in the living room lit by her homemade candles. She was the hero of the night and even Mom was proud of her. That story often came up over the years of how she saved the day. Before bed, my dad went down into the basement and I followed him. He turned the breaker box back on and I tiptoed back to bed. My sister never knew that her father did that just so she could be happy and use her homemade candles. As I told this story for the first time to anyone, I was standing in front of my father's casket, speaking at his funeral. I looked at my sister and said, "Dad took that to his grave, because that was the type of person he was. He just wanted you to be happy." I was accidentally switched at birth, and my, not biological, parents don't know. I'm 25 years old and was recently approached by a private investigator who informed me that I was accidentally switched at birth with another family's baby. Apparently, there were always doubts about their child's appearance being indicative of their genes, so they did a DNA test when their kid was about 12 years old. They essentially waited until I was an adult to find me. At 12 years old, they feared I might have wanted to come live with them, or their child would want to live with my family, so they waited until we were adults to tell us. Here's where things get weird. My biological mom is a relatively famous entertainer who has been in and out of the spotlight over the past 30 years or so. I remember watching her on TV, and my mom telling me that I looked like her. I remember disagreeing and going back into my room to play Perfect Dark on my N64. At that point in 1999, nobody knew the mix-up had occurred. Through her generosity, I have inherited millions of dollars among other things, and nobody will know. Not even my parents who raised me. People will know I have the money because I'm going to buy some wild shit with it, but I have no idea what to tell people when they ask me where it came from. In my younger years, I had a neighbor who constantly left a mess in their yard, making it look like a junkyard. and allowed their kids to run around causing trouble in the entire neighborhood. I tried to resolve it civilly by asking them to stop doing things that upset everyone. But their only response was accusing me of racism and threatening to target me, even claiming I touched their kids if I ever spoke to them again. They were grade A assholes, so I decided to respond in kind and made an anonymous tip to the cops that they were selling drugs. I did this for about 4 months, asking my friends to make similar tips every now and then. One day, I came home from school and the whole neighborhood was outside on the street. The asshole's house had cop cars and a van parked outside. It turned out the tips had worked, and the cops finally checked it out. However, when the cops arrived, there were only 2 officers, and when they went to the door to talk to them, the father fled out the back door. Long story short, this led to a chase, his apprehension, a house search, and the discovery of a large amount of pills, cocaine, and weed hidden throughout the house. Because they had kids, the consequences were severe, and both parents were arrested for drug dealing, with the children taken away. I'm not sure if it was the right thing to do, and I will never let anyone know, but at least after that, they weren't causing trouble in the neighborhood anymore. Yesterday, I responded to a car accident. I literally watched a girl I went to high school with die. She was screaming and begging to live, and then she wasn't. It wasn't surreal or like Hollywood. If one more person asks me if it was like the movies, I'm going to punch them out. I've seen my fair share of bad accidents and have never really been bothered by death. My first call was a really bad accident, and the only thing I was worried about was getting dinner. I slept like a baby last night and didn't think twice about it. I am more pissed that a young girl died with her whole life ahead of her, all because she wasn't paying attention to where she was going. People, pay the fuck attention when you're driving. What no one knows is that I came dangerously close to crying my eyes out over it. This girl was literally one of the nicest people I've known in my life. I was bullied in 9th grade, and she was one of the few cool kids who actually treated me kindly. I didn't know her well, but I'm sure as hell pissed that she had to die yesterday. When I was 17, my best friend and I were some serious fuck-ups. I don't mean we were assholes to people or anything, we just did a lot of really risky and stupid shit. Like getting into random fights with assholes at parties, doing way too many drugs at once, lighting M80s and holding them for a bit before throwing them, that kinda shit. Shit that honestly would only hurt us if it went south. Looking back, I think it was mostly because we were both pretty suicidal but didn't have the guts to just off ourselves. We had just enough people who cared that we didn't want to hurt them. I think the funniest thing about us, and probably what brought us together, was the fact that we both had a hero complex for sure. Both of us had been suspended 8 or 9 times for fighting in school, but it was mostly just beating the shit out of bullies. I can't recall a time either of us ever just picked a fight for no reason, but maybe that's just hindsight making everything look golden. Anyways, I digress. Back to the fucked up stuff, I suppose. Basically, we got into a fight with the wrong guys at a party. I got my ass beat, but my buddy saved the day in my face. My buddy pulls me up off the ground and the next thing I know, my ears are ringing and my best fucking friend in the whole world is leaning on me so hard that he pushes me into a wall and we both fall over. I feel something wet on my shirt and see blood fucking everywhere. One of the kids had pulled a gun and shot him 3 times in the side. The party cleared fast as fuck and I remember someone yelling about calling 911. But I knew my friend wasn't gonna make it, and so did he. Still, I was screaming for help and crying my eyes out. My friend was calm though. Way too calm, honestly. I think it was probably from the booze and painkillers we snorted earlier. I remember he looked me in the eyes and just said, "I'm sorry you're gonna have to live with this, it's what I want." It was choppy and gaspy as hell, but those were his last words. After that, he lost consciousness and just went. There was nothing beautiful or serene about it. My best friend died in front of me and fucking apologized. I told everyone who asked that he just said some shit like, "Tell so and so I love them." I don't know why, but that shit just hurts too bad to tell anyone, and I don't want to ruin the image of the happy-go-lucky, nice guy that everyone had of my friend. Growing up, until around age 12, I used to put on lipstick and dress as a girl, but I have always identified as male and have always been attracted to women. Interestingly, my fiancée and I are a match made in heaven. I'm a guy who's somewhat feminine, and she's a woman who's somewhat masculine. I grew up with my mom and sister, while she grew up with 3 brothers and military men. It's hard to explain, but essentially, in our relationship, I fill every gap in her femininity, and she fills every gap in my masculinity, as far as traditional gender roles are concerned. In August of 2010, I vacationed in Miami with my mom. I had then been in college, Living with my girlfriend of 3 years, dated in high school, and 4 other roommates, though at this time it was only my girlfriend and one of the roommates living there. A couple of weeks later, after getting back and having sex with my girlfriend, she began to cry and told me she had messed up and had sex with my roommate while I was gone in Miami. This girlfriend is perfect in everyone's eyes, and I agree. Besides this instance, the roommate has been one of my best friends for 10 plus years. I am now married to the girlfriend, and the roommate was my third groomsman. I still think about it from time to time because we have all hung out since, many times. I haven't told a soul to protect her integrity because it's truly the one immoral thing she has done. I was upset, sure, but for some reason, I just didn't think it was worth losing 2 previously valuable relationships. A few years ago, my best friend took his own life. Most people didn't know he had been depressed for at least 2 years, but during that time, I had saved him a couple of times. Most of his attempts weren't going to work anyway, like drinking a bottle of vodka by himself, etc., but some were more serious. One time, he tried using a mixture of different medications. I noticed immediately that something was odd when he started texting me, so I went over there, broke into his room, and called an ambulance. He had sought help before, but this was the first time he couldn't deny it to his parents and other friends, as he was in the hospital for a couple of days. He recovered, but people started treating him differently. We talked a lot about this. He didn't want to be the one who tried to off himself. The fact that people started treating him differently made things worse. He didn't want to go out anymore, locked himself in his room for days on end, and tried to avoid everybody except me. So, a couple of months later, he calls me and says he's going to do it for real this time. Everybody trying to be nice had actually pushed him over the edge, especially his parents. He tells me what he's going to do but not where. I can't stop him anymore, and I realize I don't want to anymore. This is his choice. 2 days later, they find him. As his best friend, I'm involved with the funeral arrangements. I speak to his parents, his other friends, all the while knowing they were the ones who pushed him over the edge. It's not their fault, but it felt that way at the moment. I don't think I can ever tell his parents that their attempts to be the loving parents he needed actually made him do it for real. Without going into great detail, purposely vague, more than 5 years ago, I was part of a group of 3 to 5 people that would successfully take the MCAT in place of others for a fee. We were all adept at taking the exam. Our clients were old money types with kids who couldn't make the cut, or didn't want to try. The fee was $100,000 plus any other extra charges. Fake fingerprints, IDs, prosthetics, you name it, we did it. I had no qualms doing this as my reasoning was, if they can't pass the exam, how in the world would they get through med school in the steps? Take their money and let them fail out of med school. No problems arose until one of the clients actually managed to get through school and had racked up some malpractice, thankfully nothing too serious. It hit me hard to the point of attempting to take my own life. I quit and went to therapy, and the group disbanded, for other reasons, shortly thereafter. I'm doing much better now, but this info is staying with me and the people I know, and staying with you, random reader. I accidentally caused someone's death when I was 7 or 8. I felt a disturbing amount of satisfaction when it happened that I've thought about repeating, but I have too much going for me to risk losing it all. I will never tell anyone I know, but it's lonely carrying such a secret. Backstory for the curious. I used to be a mischievous child and learned to manipulate people early on. I would bully kids and justify it so they wouldn't tell anyone. I would coerce them into giving me toys and things I wanted. Despite this, I was also very charming, and most adults adored me because I knew how to behave around them. I volunteered to help with cleaning and other tasks. I often stayed after school to tidy up and clean the blackboards, which made teachers fond of me. Over time, I found joy in causing harm without facing consequences. My older brother was the only one who didn't like me, and I've always felt he knows something is off about me. To this day, he remains distant, and I understand why. One day, I was with a neighborhood kid near a brick storage warehouse, and he showed me his Game Boy. In the mid-90s in South America, having a Game Boy was like wearing a gold Rolex for an 8-year-old. I had only played on a SNES a few times, and I became fixated on wanting that Game Boy. I felt entitled to it. After trying unsuccessfully to convince him to give it to me and being refused, I grew furious. I vividly remember the feeling because of how quickly it turned into excitement. I grabbed a loose brick from the ground and hurled it as hard as I could. It struck him squarely on the back of the head, and he collapsed forward. His body stiffened, I heard a loud exhale, and then he went limp. At no point did I feel remorse or guilt. Instead, I experienced an intense rush unlike anything before, and sometimes I find myself craving that feeling again. Then came the fear, because I realized I couldn't take the Game Boy without being implicated. I went home and carried on with my day. 2 or 3 days later, a neighborhood guard found his body and called the police. I was afraid of getting caught, but no one approached me. Years later, my parents discussed it with me, attributing my fear to being a scared child, nothing more. The boy's father faced scrutiny due to previous domestic abuse incidents, but nothing came of it, and the case remained unsolved. I haven't sought to harm anyone in a long time, I no longer find pleasure in it. But sometimes I wonder if circumstances were different, whether I might revert. I've seen a psychiatrist for other issues, but I've never disclosed this. I'm content with where I am in life and feel normal like everyone else. I choose to bury my past and will carry this secret to my grave, at least from those who know me. Lastly, for those who might argue that you can't accidentally cause someone's death, yes, you can. I didn't intend to kill him, I only wanted to hurt him for denying me.